That's it.
Hi,
Yeah.
everybody. Welcome to this series of small talks and truth. I have a guest, Maggie, and yeah, how are you, Maggie?
I'm very, very good. Thank you for inviting me. I feel very, very honored that I am the first person to talk to you on your new channel. So I'm really grateful and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining and receiving the invitation and yeah, being here today. So we want to jump right into the juice and right into the subject. And um, I would like to start by asking a couple of questions and probably telling me a little bit more about what is awakening for you.
Wow, this is such an amazing question because this idea about more awakening is has been evolving. It's sort of never really static, and there's such a difference between what I thought awakening was, you know, prior, and also, and I think, I don't think I'm an exception in that, we read books and we listen to people, and and they share their knowledge and their experience and everything, and everyone has sort of ideas about um, what it is. Um, I mean, I would say for me, first of all, awakening really is just the beginning, This is like the first thing that comes to mind in that I think I used to think, for example, that awakening was like an arrival point of some sort, and that, once I awaken, I'll be sort of I don't know, in at least kind of semi bliss state most of the time, you know, and that I will just, be sort of neutral and not much going on. And in some ways, it is sort of true, but it's not really, it's not played out the way I thought it would play out. So I would say, to me, awakening really is just the beginning in a sense that, and I'm only speaking based on, my journey because that's the only thing I really know is that, you know, it's really waking up to who we truly are, and the way that came about for me, it was just realizing in a split second that we're living in a thought created reality, And with that realization came this incredible peace. It's almost like I was experiencing reality, but without any thoughts. So therefore, I was really experiencing this incredible peace of mind, which, funnily enough, I always felt it was something available to everybody since very, very early age. I kind of intuitively knew that. And I feel like I've been searching for that, for ever since. It's just that I wasn't aware that I was doing that, that there was this kind of place I thought, or like a piece that was sort of constant regardless of what sort of happens in our heads or in our lives externally. I kind of knew I would never describe it that way at the time, but I felt that this was something that was available to all of us, you know um now I can tell you that that peace is literally who we are. It's that complete infinite sort of, you know space, or whatever we want to call it. I don't even know, because actually it is indescribable and all words kind of fall short. So, so that was, I wouldn't, it really had a massive impact. It really was, I would say it was the end of victimhood, even though, and when I say victimhood, I mean, it was the end of kind of blaming external circumstances or people for how I feel. You know, it was literally, it came to an end completely. And I honestly, it's been like 12 years, I think, since, and I have never ever blamed anyone for how, or circumstances for how I feel, you know? And even if I got caught up in some kind of drama or some kind of thinking like that, I would always recognize it immediately as bullshit, you know? So it wasn't about just not getting caught up at all in this. It was just recognizing what was true. And that was, you know, and that in of itself had a tremendous impact in terms of like my relationships and with people and the relationship with life, you know, and things like that. So I mean, that was massive. And it was also massive because that state of that kind of neutrality lasted for over a year, you see. And the other thing that I want to say is that at the time I would never call it an awakening. And because I was so anti-spirituality, I was like in the academic, you know, it was more like I was open-minded, but open to exploring things, but I was really put off. I didn't even know what non-duality was, or I was really put off by spiritual lingo and, you know, I was just like, you know, really ordinary person. And um, so I didn't really have any point of reference as to really what happened and what that means, what it entails, and so on. All I knew is that all of a sudden I was just in this really peaceful place, you know. And funnily enough, that year really, uh, since that moment happened, you know, as far as external circumstances, this really was one of the most challenging years of my life. And I mean, there were a couple of situations, in particular one where really I am 100% certain that had it happened prior to the awakening, I would be broken. I would be on my knees, you know, because it was such a shocking, quite traumatic situation that took place in my life. And yet here I was dealing with all sorts of things crumbling around me sort of externally. But I was really operating from a place of clarity, you know, and just I felt like I was moving so gracefully through these circumstances. I'm still astounded when I think back to those times. But it had nothing to, when I say neutrality, this has nothing to do with numbness. I think that sometimes this can be kind of like confusing to people. It's not that I wasn't sad. It's not that there weren't any emotions. It's just that there was something underneath it all that was really unshaken by anything that was happening. And because there was so little thinking happening, therefore the noise was less. So therefore I had more clarity as to how to navigate these really challenging circumstances, you know? So, you know, so that lasted for over a year. And, you know, now I know 12 years later that really that was just the beginning of, I would say, the falling away of a sense of separate self, you know, really grad. And when I say that, I mean, and I didn't even, again, I would never tell you that at the time. Like I had no idea, you know, but I spent, you know, I was chatting to someone recently about the dissolution of a sense of self, which was like the next really important pivotal moment that happened in my life. And I said to that person, but that self was falling apart for like 10 years. You know what I mean? Like it seems like it's like an overnight thing or whatever. No, it's not. It's been really falling apart for all these years. And what I mean by that is really just everything to do with identity and with ideas about who I was and what I should be doing in my life. And, you know, I mean, I was hitting the wall. I'm telling you, it was like I had this plan and then I would like hit the wall constantly. It was like everything was just crashing down, anything that was coming not from the place of freedom and truth was being crashed down, like one thing after another, so so for a long time, Naren, I was in a place of crisis, crisis. So it doesn't mean that I was like suffering all the time or anything like that, but there was this lingering like feeling of, I don't know who I am anymore. Like I had no idea who I was anymore. Um, I didn't know what I'm supposed to do, or it felt like I was in my one leg in some kind of space and the other leg here. But there was still this very, and I didn't know how to reconcile the two. Um, and then I also struggled because I didn't have any point of reference. Because I lived for over a year in this like neutral state. And then that started changing and the suffering kept on coming up and all sorts of things started coming up to the surface. I was really shocked, and it wasn't out of arrogance. I didn't even thought that it was an awakening, or, oh, I'm an awakened person and therefore this should not be happening. No, it was just like I was so used to living from this place that when the suffering started coming to the surface and all sorts of things started resurfacing, and the guidance that I got at the time, and I'm absolutely not making it personal or blaming anyone for it. It's just what it was at the time. Actually didn't help because stuff started to resurface, and rather than and I was kind of advised to almost like push it away, to not look at it because it doesn't matter. Because with the awakening, once you know who you truly are, it doesn't matter. So actually that did me a huge disservice, and I'm not saying that the guidance was aimed to be malicious or to do something wrong, but I'm just saying that it really didn't help. It really, really didn't help, because now I know that a lot of suffering happened exactly because I was resisting being with what was coming up to the surface. So I was in a constant resistant mode, and therefore I was suffering. And therefore that process of falling apart, so to speak, was way more painful than it had to be. And it lasted much longer, even though I also recognize that it lasted exactly however long it had to. It was just my journey, and I had to go through it. And I'm actually really glad that I went through it, because it taught me so much, about that. So, to go back to your question, it's very clear to me that therefore awakening is really just the beginning of the falling away of everything that isn't true, basically, and really, I would say that the most pivotal kind of next thing is really, at least for me, that was the solution of a sense of separation that it was complete. I have never ever felt sense of so that feeling that I had for such a long time of being like in between sort of two worlds that I struggled to reconcile, that just went, that sense of separation, or the need to reconcile, or some kind of struggle, that feeling of like being connected or disconnected, all of that sort of went away. And then, with the Kundalini awakening and all of this, ultimately, and even when that happened, I didn't know at the time that this is sort of what happened. It's only that I realized later on that that sense of self has kind of was gone. It's like there's like that sense of anybody being there. It's been gone, for quite a while. but even that, and I suppose that many people refer to it as liberation, and I think that many people, and certainly that was my case as well, I thought that that would be an arrival point.
Mhm.
That would be an end point to this journey. I really don't see this. I think that liberation is really changes everything in the way life is being experienced, really in a fundamental way. And we can talk a little bit about that, what that actually means a little bit. But the way I see it right now, and check in with me in 2 years time, we'll see, how we go from there. I feel like I'm in the infancy or like toddler stage, as far as liberation, in that there's still stuff coming up to the surface, but it's very sort of visceral. It's not psychological. It's more like, visceral, like more in the body. I don't really know how to explain that. And there's a sense of like a process of like emptying happening, and of things that I'm not even aware of, which is why, for example, breath work with you is such a wonderful gift, because stuff is being clearly released that I'm not even consciously aware as to what it actually is, and there's really no need to know. So I think ultimately, Naren, I think it really is about just no resistance to life, no resistance to life, no resistance to anything that is happening, good or bad, or whatever. Yeah, because I can see, not just in my own journey, but in the journey of many people, um, that so much suffering comes not from actually what is arising, whether it's internally or externally, but it's from either the resistance to it or the narratives about what is happening. There's one single thought that this should not be happening, or something else should be happening, and having certain expectations, that alone is creating suffering. So yeah, it's been a ride.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah, I bet it's been a ride. So maybe people that will be listening to this will be asking themselves, like, how how did it happen? Like, how um if I want to if I would be one day experiencing this, how could I kind of know that that's what is happening, not rationally but experientially?
What do you mean? You have to clarify this question for me.
Yeah, so maybe people that would be listening to, they're wondering, like, how did it happen? Uh, how did you recognize it, that something had had changed?
Mhm. I think, well, the first change that was so noticeable, it was after that, what I call like the first awakening, the initial awakening, which was in the end of the victimhood, of seeing myself as a victim of life or anything like that. Um, and what it meant to move through life when we're not caught up, in our heads, when we're not caught up in thinking. But this part is also important, because this is not about absence of thoughts. You know what I mean? This is not about the absence of thoughts. It's about the realizing the sort of transient nature of thought, and thought as like energy that has no solidity to it. So you can have the thoughts sort of float around. But, you know, I mean, and again, I can only speak from the way it's experienced here, is that the thoughts appear, but they sort of float around rather than stick, so to speak. So, so it doesn't matter what thought occurs. It's just, it's free to be there, so to speak, you know, but that there's no landing place of that thought or stickiness. And there, because this is what I think creates psychological, what I would call like a psychological turmoil, you know. The identification with the thought, that seeing it as something solid and real, you know. So realizing that I don't have to change my thoughts, you know. My entire first book was about that, because I really wanted to help young people, in particular college students, university students at the time, because they were really struggling with mental health. And a lot of it was just around this belief, you know, just really believing their thoughts, you know, and freaking out, and knowing that it's okay to feel up and down, that that doesn't mean that they are, you know, there's anything wrong with them and stuff like that. So I mean, that was massive, Naren. I mean, that alone, you know, was massive. But I think for me, um, the greatest difference at the moment is there's just no resistance to anything. You know, this is like the best way to describe it. And this was actually one of the most pivotal moments of my journey. It was actually, there was a moment of this massive insight into what I can only call, I couldn't find a better word, like the mechanism of resistance. This was like seeing it, you know, like seeing how it works. And honestly, it's indescribable, the power of resistance, the way we resist what is, you know, whether it's through the narratives, through the things that we tell ourselves about what's happening, through labeling things good or bad, you know, through eating, drinking, scrolling on phone, talking things through endlessly, you know. I mean, there is just so much resistance happening. And this is innocent, by the way. It's not like we're doing it on purpose. And in fact, I would say that the more aware we become, the subtler the ways we resist what is become as well. And they are really difficult to spot, you know? So you think you're kind of okay with what is, but really you're always out, you know, looking for something better or different or something like that, you know? So, so I would say that, yeah, what I have been noticing is primarily that. And I think one of the most difficult things to describe for me as well, in terms of the experience, is that the suffering has also come to an end because the resistance has dropped, you see? But this is difficult to explain, because it really doesn't mean absence of even painful emotions. You know what I mean? Like in fact, I would say it's the opposite. It's because there's no resistance to anything that is unsettling. I actually have been feeling things way more powerfully, you know, than before, because it's allowed. You know, not that there's nobody allowing it. It's just what is. It's just, you know, so if it's sadness, I can, you know, I can break like in tears, like seeing a beauty of something or seeing someone suffering, and I'll be in pieces, you know, like crying and feeling the pain of someone, or feel it, you know, um all powerful emotions. I've got just chills going throughout my body. Just
Yeah.
it's so powerful, actually. It's way more so when there's sadness, the sadness is even more powerful, you know. If
Hmm.
there's any other it's even more powerful. But the difference, and this is the bit that I really struggle to articulate, is that there's no one being affected by it anymore. You know what I mean? So, like, for example, a sadness would create turmoil, you know, anger would create turmoil, or upset or anxiety would create turmoil, because I don't want to feel this, or because I should not be feeling this, right? This is how that resistance shows up. So
Hmm.
because there's nobody resisting it anymore, that sadness is free to be there. But it's more like, not that I am sad, there's just sadness. And it doesn't matter if it's your sadness, or like your sadness can be my sadness, you know? But, and I can really have my heart completely break. And it's okay, because it breaks into nothingness, you know what I mean? It doesn't really actually break. We fear break, you know, and breaking of the heart, you know, heartbreak, breakdown. You know, we anything break, yeah. It's like it's the thing that we fear the most, but which is understandable. But it's actually a gateway to love, you know. It's
Mm.
really gateway to love. So when we actually allow for stuff to break, you know, what we get surprised, you know,
Yeah.
because what's there, it's really just love. It's just you know, an indescribable, infinite, unconditional love that holds it all. You know, so that's a big surprise.
Yeah.
You know, the very thing that we're so scared of, that we're resisting so much. Um, and of course, listen, like I completely realize that, you know, it's easier to talk about it and to see that once someone experienced it, right? So like we know that, but when you don't know that and you are in the midst of, you know, crisis, the dark night of the soul and everything, you know, and you have, and believe me, I can tell you that uh there was a point in those 10 years post awakening. It was one of the most frightening moments of my life, where I I felt like I was being sucked into a dark hole, you know? And boy, if I read certain books by then, or like, you know, heard some people talk about it, I would have a completely different reaction to this. But, you know, I was completely, I don't remember I felt like I was basically going to die, that I will be sucked into this darkness and I will basically die. And I remember the terror, the terror. It was, I even stood beside my partner, and I remember we stood outside on the patio, and I held on to his arm because I felt I had to be holding on to him, because if I didn't, I would be sucked into that blackness and, you know, just die.
Mm.
That very same thing. So I mean, I really, believe me, if when people describe the terror of the dark night of the soul, or that sort of terror of being like sucked, like I really understand the
Yeah.
fear, which is why, you know, once you met the touch the emptiness, or touch the unconditional love, right? So if you say, just go for it, you know. Like, you know, if I could tell that terrified woman, you know, at the time, hey, just take a plunge, girl, you know, it's gonna be fun, you know, you're gonna be surprised. um that wouldn't land, honestly. If someone told me that, just go for it, you know, when I was so terrified.
Yeah.
So fast forward, you know, a few more years, and that same abyss opened up again. But at that point, I was in a completely different place. There was just no not taking the plunge possible in this moment. So the plunge happened, and that was really death. You know, that was that's the best way I can describe it. And the discovery that that fear really is love, which is, you know, there's no separation. It's the same, you know, it's the same energy, and it melts into love. And that was a shock to
Mhm.
discover that, to say the least, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, and how did you come to that realization? How did you say like, okay, I'm gonna plunge in and I'm gonna go for it?
Um, there was, you know, this was, I mean, honestly, it's such a long story, but let me try to a few months prior to this moment, I was really going through a very dark time. Okay. Like I was really meeting things that I never even knew I had to meet. Okay. Like, and I mean, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty. It was meeting shame. It was meeting, I mean, I just, you know, just the thought of it. Like, why did I put myself through it? But you know, honestly, it was impossible not to. That this is one thing that is so important, that I felt, you know, conveyor belt, or like a travelator, you know, that you step on at the airport, you know, that kind of like, it's like a platform that moves, that you can walk on. Yeah,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
moves you. You
Hmm.
know, to me, awakening is just a beginning that gets you on this like travelator, or whatever you want to call it, and it just takes you, okay? And you can think, you can either stand and be moved and go with the flow on this journey, or you can walk even though it moves you anyway, and think that you are in control of something, right? So it's a I honestly, I was literally traveling, changing stations recently on the London tube, and there was this thing called travelator, and I stood there and just let it take me, and I stood there thinking, this is such a brilliant metaphor for intelligence of life. You know, I was like, literally, it's like, sure, you can walk, sure, you can take steps and take action, you know, it's also true, it's also part of it. But when you think that you are controlling this process, you know what I mean, and that you have better ideas about how things should be, and when they should happen, and how they should happen, boy, are you for disappointment. And you know, just it's also part of the fun, you know, it's part of the
Hmm.
journey. But it's just that the journey is easier the more you let go of this idea that you're in control. And then, you know, when you let go of these ideas about how things should happen, when they should happen, how they should happen, right? So, you know, I could never ever like take my journey and think all the things that happen, and here's the prescription, you know. If you follow these steps, you know what, first of all, why would I do this to people? I mean, like, you know, go through the dark night of the soul and meet your shame, like be destroyed by it, you know, like, I mean, who with a sane mind would do that? So, but I can tell you that this moment of this abyss, you know, that plunge, it was preceded by months of meeting all this stuff. And I felt that something was still, there was something like, you know what I mean? Like, to the point of there was like this knot that I had between like heart and tummy. that really felt like a stone, hard like stone, and it was actually painful. And the way
Mm-hmm.
I describe it is the best way I can describe it. And I don't know if this is what it was. I'm just telling you what it felt like.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like a knot of separation, to me. It was like the ultimate, like physical manifestation of a sense of separation. And so basically all of a sudden I was taken by that fear. And I lay down and I went into this knot. I went into this, like my whole awareness, I just went into this pain, this
Mm-hmm.
fear, this whatever that was. And I started inquiring, and believe me, I have no idea even how I knew what questions to ask. It was like I was on a roll. I was on a travelator again. I just went with it. And so, and it got me to the point like, oh, like I was like, what is this? And oh, it is this. And if it's this, then what does that mean? And if it means this, what does that mean? And it was like peeling of like layers and layers and layers of like onion until I got to like, if in my case it was the question was like, well, if you're not special, because what was like the greatest fear that I'm not special. Can you believe it?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, it makes me laugh right now, but actually that was the most frightening. It was the biggest fear,
Yeah.
when okay, what does it mean? Well, it means I'm not special. And if I'm not special, then what does that mean? And I was like, I'm nobody, sorry. Um, and that was it was death. It was like, that abyss just opened. It was just this darkness that I recognized from years before. But it's just I couldn't not go there anymore. Like there was no like anyone, would you like to enter or would you like to not enter?
Yeah.
There really wasn't a choice at this point. And honestly, it was that I could literally feel that knot dissolving in my body. Like literally that whatever that knot was, it was opening as I was like falling basically into that abyss. And that knot just completely dissolved. And it's been gone since. And so the sense of separation was not just in terms of like perceptual sense of separation, like that sense of nobody being there and so on. I really struggled to explain because it was kind of twofold for me that happened. But it was also the energetics and complete end of separation. So I have ever since not felt my body has never felt separate anymore. You know what I mean? So like
Mm.
everything is very fluid. Everything has been very fluid since, in just like my perception. Um, you know, but yeah, I mean, it was death, it was death, and that kicked in with the Kundalini that was already kicking in,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately, it really the buildup of it just hit me one night, and I basically, just disappeared. That I, was gone. But even then, because and I'm grateful, although this is a different topic, but I'm grateful that I was at the time with the teacher. I was just part of like a little group with a teacher who was very not very anti Kundalini, but like not really want to hear about these things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
actually, so it actually served me because I didn't see it as it was really powerful, but I didn't see it as anything special. So I didn't really talk about it, and it was not until my conversation with Angela, I think it was the second conversation with Angela, that I realized that sense of self has never been back
Yeah.
anymore. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But it was like because I never thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of never realized later on in sort of retrospect, it's like, oh my God, it's never been gone, you know, but I haven't really thought about it. And obviously, ever since it's been, uh, you know, like I said, it's like I feel like a toddler, at the moment.
Mm.
It's like just um it's a very, very different way of being,
Mhm.
in the world, but so far and again, check with me in like a year or two. I think that really awakening is just the beginning. Liberation is by no means an arrival point either, like the sort of the journey continues, and I think it's really about then kind of emptying of things that are no longer true, but are no longer conscious or psychological, that are more sort of in the body, and the sort of unconscious or subconscious stuff that we're not really aware of, which is why, again, breath work, for example, is such a brilliant way to get into those bits,
Mm.
so yeah, so that's like literally the quickest way I think I've ever told this story, because you know me, I am not in a nutshell kind of a person. So yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all that. It was very it's very interesting everything that you're saying. I have a question for you. So maybe some people might wondering like
Mhm.
you're talking about um, the sense of separation, and I think it was one of my questions at one point where I heard the first time that sentence of not being separate.
Mhm.
Um, but it really struck me as separate to what?
Oh boy, I literally, as you were saying this, I was like, I totally get it. Like I remember, I remember exactly my struggles. Separate from what? You know what I mean? It was just like I remember being so frustrated. I'm like, I get there's no separation, but like separate from what? What is this nonsense? You know? So that's lovely that there's no sense of separation, but what the hell does that mean? Oh, wow. I don't know whether I can honestly answer this question. I think I think that it's one of those things, as annoying as it sounds, um, where until it's experienced, any kind of answer as to what this means uh, is kind of not true.
Mm.
It's kind of not this, and I know that there are people who are incredibly articulate and they can possibly talk about, explain to you what that means. I I think the best shot I can give is that basically who we truly are is the openness and the infinite space in which everything is happening. Okay? So therefore everything is included. So therefore nothing is separate. And I think I remember what got me closer to getting it for the first time or seeing it for the first time. I was literally walking in the park and I looked at the sky, and there's this vast infinite blue sky that day, and there were like these two white clouds, you know that sort of appeared as separate, but in that they were like part of the sky, you know what I mean? So they appear as though they're like the sky and the clouds are two separate things, but really they're just appearing in the same thing. Yeah, I mean, it's so articulate of me, right? But this is important, right? Because I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but when you really, and I am a lover of simplicity, by the way. I really, I've always been like this. I even in my academic career, I always admired professors that were talking about complex things or difficult things in very simple terms, you know? I always, because I believe that any knowledge, and in particular spiritual knowledge, has to speak to every person,
Yeah.
everyone, of every background, every age. You know, it cannot be exclusive. As soon as you make it complicated and it becomes like this exclusive thing, you know, they're just for certain people. Oh, you know, so which is why I'm so shit at articulating these things, but
You're doing
you know,
great. It's awesome
but
what you're saying.
but you know, but what I'm saying, but this is important because you know, I remember walking and I thought, you know, when that cloud, let's say dark cloud, you know, appears in that sky is completely chilled with it. That sky doesn't go, you should not be here, you know, can you get out, you know, please don't spoil my view, or like, you know, whatever. This is literally a great metaphor for
Hmm.
really how we're doing the separation, right? So the cloud is just free to be there, it's included, it's part of the thing, it's just there, it's just what is. Okay, now,
Hmm.
right? And therefore there's no sense of separation, there's no sense of separation, it's just what is, you know. But as soon as the mind goes into, you should not be here, this should not be happening, you know, you're ugly, or like you know, I'd rather you came by, you know, at 5 p.m. instead of like in the morning, you know, and this is shit and I don't like that this is happening, you know. That's separation, right?
Yeah.
so
And I
so
think it,
really, so I would say that the separation is really um in other another way to talk about separation is really just resistance toward what is, you know, that that mostly shows up by the narratives of the mind about how things should be, you know. I
yeah,
gave it a
wow. That
shot.
was beautiful
I
to
I
hear.
gave it a shot.
No, that was amazing. Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
honestly, Naren, and we talked about it yesterday when we saw each other, that on and on and on, I'm telling you, when I'm seeing people in like the one-on-one setting, they will be sharing different issues and different problems, and you know, different, and they're real, you know, this is real stuff that people are going through, and the journeys are really unique and different, which is why one of the things I always say, please do not compare your journeys to other people, because it really just doesn't serve any purpose. um but really, the one thing that is that they all have in common is the resistance,
Yeah.
to what is, you know. And I say it with utmost you know, understanding and compassion, because I've done it for like 10 years. So you know what I mean, like I really
Mhm.
know what it means, the pain of resisting what is, the fear of meeting the difficult moments, the shame, the fear, the, you know, facing fear of abandonment, you know, facing the truth of, let's say, you know, realizing that I have been controlling or I have been manipulative in my relationship, for, you know what I mean? To like, it's how can we not resist this? You know what I mean? It's like it's right.
Yeah.
So I think what's in when I talk about this resistance, it's part of that resistance is also very much part of the journey, and frankly it's the best teacher.
Mhm.
And I would say if anyone who's watching this is going through it, just please love yourself through it. Like you
Wow.
just love
Yeah.
yourself through it, because it's not, because it's so easy then to go, oh, I should not, okay, so I have to stop resisting now, I should stop oh no, I resisted again. um because that's just another
Yeah.
resistance to resisting, right? And
Yes.
it can become a bit of a mind fuck, which
Yeah.
and we really want to stay away from the mind. So you know so just love yourself. Let's love ourselves, through all these perceived fuck ups and failures, to not to resist, things like that. Like, honestly, that elevator, that travelator that I was talking about is perfection.
Wow.
Our journey, the way it plays out, yeah, is perfect. Like, if you take our ideas about how things should be and our comparisons with other people and all of that, if you strip all that away, that travelator is like it's a smooth ride. Okay, I'm not saying it's an easy ride, but it's a much smoother ride, when we strip away these ideas that that we have. So, you know again, it's not about not having these ideas. It's about just loving yourself through the process of the mess, of the beautiful mess that this journey is, loving the journey as this mess, loving ourselves as the mess that we are while we're going through it. Like, I mean, if you can do just that, that's like, plenty, you know
Yeah.
a side of awakening or enlightenment, like, forget about it. You know what I mean? Like, if you can just do that, uh, that's like loads. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's you just said so many things that are just that I could listen over and over because they were just spot on how you articulated it. So when you said I'm not articulated, I was like, you're doing amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. I think I would like to take a pause for now because
Hmm.
I think there was a lot of nuggets here, and yeah, thank you so much for your wisdom and your smile, your presence, and
Thank you so
everything.
much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Maggie.
much for having me. I honestly, I just all I do is just sharing what I continue to learn. Like, I mean, this journey has been so amazing, and it's been evolving constantly. So if I can just share what I learned along the way, if it can be a bit helpful, then that's just fantastic. So if that's the case, then thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Mm. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.